And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, could I still get a COVID vaccine in Texas if I agree ahead of time to register for PetLink? And with head coach John Gruden resigning as Raiders coach and news of new Chucky films, are we in for a mind-blowing cultural confluence? And now, the podcast host who's a big deal in media circles just as long as he wears his pants, Pete Dominic.
That is right. Thank you very much, Pete Co, for another hilarious and bizarre opening of the show. Love you, buddy. Pete Co, VO on Twitter, by the way. Always great. Okay. Welcome to today's show. 3 great reasons to listen. I've got news into excellent conversations with very smart guests, including a first-timer here on Stand Up. Jack Jenkins joins me to talk about his reporting with Religious News Service and his excellent book titled American Prophets, The Religious Roots of Progressive Politics and the Ongoing Fight for the Soul of the Country, now out in paperback, published last year. Super smart reporter. Had an awesome conversation with him. Really excited to introduce you to him if you haven't read him or heard of his work before. Really great stuff. And before that, I got Eric Segall with, I caught him mid-rant. He just called me up. He's like, I got a rant. And we had a great conversation about a real controversial issue in person. And then also we had a hilarious conversation about his guinea pigs at the end of it. And it's worth staying for. So Jack Jenkins, Eric Segall, both joined me. And, of course, lots of news to get to from yesterday. Time for the last 24. Oh, man, I learned a lot of things I didn't need to know on social media yesterday, including that Tom Cruise went with his son to a baseball game and his face looked swollen like Norm Macdonald. Everybody's saying that Tom Cruise looks like Norm Macdonald. I don't know. The new Superman, apparently Superman's son, new comic book, Superman's son, I guess he's gay. He's got a male partner, which is great, but the usual suspects are showing their usual outrage. Football coach John Gruden, who was a longtime NFL coach, I saw him one day on the beach in Nantucket. Anyway, who cares? He hates everyone, apparently. He's out as the Raiders coach after saying all kinds of racist and sexist and anti-gay shit. And even like he's even against the concussion protocols. Like, I'm not sure what his redeeming qualities are, but he got canned by the Raiders yesterday. Apparently, Donald Trump is now selling T-shirts that say "fuck Joe Biden" or "fuck Biden" for like $45. And of course, yesterday was Columbus Day, so a lot of people were tweeting about Columbus not being such a great guy. And if you missed my interview with Kenneth C. Davis, it was really good. Learned a lot from him as always. Just caught a bug in here. I don't know if that was going to bite me or not. Now I feel bad. I might have needed to kill it. Oh, and I'm just reading a tweet now from Bill B. in D.C. Pete, you may want to sit down for this. Superman was always gay. Really? Was he always gay? What about Lois? Was she a beard? What was that? I thought that was true love. This is great. I mean, comic books, are the way in for so many cultural changes in our lives, and I think it's great. Jason Johnson had a quick thread about it. He said about Superman coming out as bisexual. As a general rule, it annoys me that people who know nothing about comics drive discourse about a format they haven't read in 20 years, but people are shocked or supportive. I'm cautiously optimistic. John Kent is Clark Kent's son from various merged realities and the potential future of Superman. This matters because while introducing new characters with queer identities is good, it's not as bold as having established characters come out a Wonder Woman. Because at the end of the day, Wonder Woman grew up on an island of women only, and I think her or Bruce or Clark was kind of corny. Maybe hashtag Superman, but that's pushing it. And he went on with more of that thread if you want to read it at Dr. Jason Johnson if you followed me that far. Okay, so few things I want to play for you, as always, here. First of all, here's 2 minutes from an interesting report from Elle Reeve of CNN. She went to Missouri and talked to some folks there. This is her talking to a farmer She was talking to all these folks in Missouri where a lot of people have not gotten vaccinated. The vaccination rates are very low. She talked to hospital workers, including nurses. It was a great report, like a 10-minute report. But here's the 2 minutes where she went out and talked to this farmer.
Dr. Wilson also tried to convince his high school best friend, Kurt Triplett, who co-owns Triplett Farms with his brothers.
For me personally, I have no problem with the vaccine, but what has turned rural America or conservatives against it is basically turn it into a political football.
Are you vaccinated?
I am not.
You're not. How come?
We live very secluded where we're at. I don't feel like the risk either to me or to someone else is high enough to justify taking it.
I'm sorry if this is a dumb question, but you can yell at me if you think it is.
No.
But, don't you vaccinate your animals?
To some extent, herd immunity does happen, and maybe the vaccine would speed that up. Other times, it isn't that big a deal.
But, what about a farm dog?
We do take our dogs in for rabies and
parvo
and things like that.
Yeah,
yes.
parvo.
Yes. We don't want them to be sickly, so yes, we do.
Well, just explain it to me like I'm an idiot. Why do you see those things as different?
Really, I'm not going to say that I'm not getting the vaccine because I don't believe it wouldn't do the job, that it wouldn't work. I don't know what all the risks are out there for the vaccine. I mean, they're well documented. We don't have to go over all the risks. And I just feel like my risk of being exposed to COVID and what it do to me is not greater than the risks that the vaccine has, is what it really comes down to.
Yeah, wow. Okay, a lot there to unpack. I just would have answered him with, yeah, but your risks with an aspirin are actually higher than they are with this vaccine. So what would you say about that? A lot of contradictions, but that's sad. The whole segment is worth watching. It was interesting to watch, but it made me sad that people were so scared and believe what they believe. It really did. I wasn't very angry. I was just sad because these people have been so misled, and it's so sad. Okay, well, let me get to another interesting clip. This is Axios reporter Alexis McHammond. She was talking to Ben & Jerry of Ben & Jerry's ice cream about the fact that they pulled their ice cream out of the occupied territories in the West Bank. And I don't know, I thought this was really interesting, and I liked it a lot. So I'm going to share this few minutes with you from Axios on HBO.
Ben & Jerry's announced its decision to stop selling ice cream in Israeli-occupied Palestinian territories. Were you surprised by the backlash that came after that?
No, I wasn't surprised. And yet when it happens, it's still painful.
You have some loyal customers who think that the move is anti-Semitic. You're both Jewish men. How did it feel personally to be wrapped up in accusations of being anti-Semitic?
Totally fine.
For some reason, I think Jerry's answer is going to be different.
It's absurd. I mean, no. I mean, what? I'm anti-Jewish? I mean, I'm a Jew. Well, my family is Jewish. My friends are Jewish. I mean,
I understand people being upset. It's a very emotional issue for a lot of people, and I totally understand it. It's a very painful issue for a lot of people.
Can you help me understand why this decision came now? This conflict has been going on for years.
We're always in favor of a two-state solution. The policy of the Israeli government has been to endorse these settlements in the occupied territories that keep on making it harder and harder to actually have a two-state solution.
In what way do you both feel that, withholding money or taking money from somewhere is a way to hold someone accountable?
Well, in terms of Israel, I don't view it as withholding money. It's just saying we don't want our ice cream sold in the occupied territories.
Right. But that affects the economy to an extent.
Not much. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket.
So then is that really a big stand?
It's not a financial stance. It's a policy stance.
Ben & Jerry's publicly supported Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter, but over the years, the company continues to sell more ice cream and thrive.
There's more of that interview over at HBO Axios, and so, but I thought that was interesting and worth watching and sharing with you. A controversial topic, but a brave stance taken by those guys who have always been very, very progressive and still made a shitload of money and making their ice cream and selling it to people who love it, including me. And I don't even really like ice cream that much. That's right. I said it. Fight me. I don't know what to tell you. I don't hate it. I just don't love it. Also, part of the reason I look so goddamn good. All right. Enough about my amazing figure, but let's now talk about, just want to play for you a quick clip. This is Congressman Jamie Raskin, who I think is amazing, has done great, great work, and Congressman Andy Biggs, who is an insurrectionist and a traitor. Anyway, this wasn't yesterday, so it doesn't technically fit in the last 24, but I saw it yesterday, so they clashed over the results of the election. It's a short clip. Here it is.
To President Biden's
effect. Who won the election is my question, Mr. Biggs. I'm happy to yield to you for that. Who won the election in Arizona? Donald Trump?
We don't know, because as the audit, it demonstrates very clearly, Mr. Raskin, there are a lot of issues with this election that took place. We're going to go.
No, there weren't. There just weren't. And you guys even did a crazy fake audit in Arizona, and you even still found nothing. So just really so tough to take at this point. But still so many Republicans on the bandwagon. Okay, and speaking of which, let's listen to some analysis on CNN by Bob Woodward, who sat down with Aaron Burnett. And, well, clearly I didn't find a lot of great audio if I'm going to Bob Woodward, who, this is fine. I think he's lost a step in his analysis, but here it is anyway.
Senator Grassley, you know, I remember the first time I met Senator Grassley. It was many, many years ago. He's the most senior member of the Senate. And I know that you have known him a very long time, covered him. Does it surprise you, you know, just looking at that history of all the things that he was so clear about saying months ago, that he's now doing a 180 and sharing the stage with Trump and happily accepting his endorsement?
Well, first of all, we've got to figure out what's really going on here. And I remember George Kennan, the father of the containment strategy with the Soviet Union, once referred to what he called the treacherous curtain of deference, where people go into the Oval Office or deal with the president and they're deferential. What's going on now really is an iron curtain of obedience to Trump. It's not just polite deference, it is obedience, and it really is an iron curtain because it's so strong. These people, like Senator Grassley, can count, they can look at the polls, they go to their home states, they talk to constituents, and there are tens of millions of people who support Trump. And you know, in the Republican Party, it's over 50% probably. So this is a political strength that we have rarely seen, never seen from a former president. After Nixon resigned, he didn't go out in campaign. He conducted a war against history to say Watergate was really just a blip, but the tapes buried Nixon and showed that that was not true. In the press, I think what we've got to do, and one thing Robert Costa and I did in our book, is we looked at these claims of the stolen election and found documents that Rudy Giuliani had sent to Lindsey Graham, a now famous memo that John Eastman, the lawyer working for Trump in the White House, sent, which was really just a battle plan for a coup. And two of the most Trump-supporting Republicans in the party investigated independently. Lindsey Graham did, Senator Mike Lee of Utah, and they discovered there is absolutely a zero there. Yeah. So, you know, we're just going to have to find more evidence to what happened. What Costa and I did, we realized we had to look at this And it's the first proof, I think, that's out there that it's a totally bogus claim, and it's made by Trump supporters.
Bob Woodward talking about Trump supporters on CNN last night. And speaking of Trump supporters, Alan West is running for governor in Texas, and he just got COVID. And so last night on Joy Reid's show on MSNBC, Joy asked my friend Dr. Jason Johnson about Alan West. And this is hilarious and lacing critique of Alan West by Jason. Again, second mention in today's show.
The grid is private, but private businesses can't have vaccine mandates if they want to. And the guy who wants to replace Governor Abbott, who is already so far to the right, he's basically to the right of Attila the Hun, is the guy who, I remember him from Florida. He's the guy who mock executed an Iraqi policeman and got in trouble in the army. Here's a couple of his quotes on Barack Obama, on the Barack Obama White House. If you're here to stand up, get your musket, fix your bayonet, and charge into the ranks. You're my brother and sister in this fight. He said that black people were better off during segregation because they had better educational opportunities, and called Islam not a religion. Your thoughts?
You know, look, speaking of educational opportunities, one of the other crimes that we've seen lately in the state of Texas is this new book banning that they've got, where they're chasing after books and they don't want kids to learn about critical race theory. That's why I have Jerry Kraft right behind me. He writes great books for kids, and these are the kinds of things they don't want. But this is the thing. Alan West, he is the zeitgeist of the Republican Party right now. They want that same kind of, they want that sort of natural, all-natural flavor racism, but they want it in blackface with a 1990s flat-top haircut. That's what they want, and that's what they can get out of Alan West. And if he can actually get out of bed and hopefully realize that he could actually catch COVID again because the magical antibodies that he thinks he has now will not keep him any safer if he continues to run around and grab hand the way that he is, he will be the kind of person that many Republicans in that state want. But here's the problem. The state of Texas is not nearly as Republican as the idiots that they seem to want to have running. 95% of the growth in that state has been coming from minorities and people from other more liberal progressive places moving into the state. And at some point, the dam is going to break. And you'll start seeing politicians that reflect the people who live there and not just the moneyed interests who are paying their way.
Well, I love that criticism. I think he makes a lot of good points, but I've got David Daley in my head thinking about the conversation about redistricting and gerrymandering in those districts in Texas, which is why that might not be correct analysis in terms of the outcomes there. But always great to hear from Jason Johnson. I'd love to hear him in conversation with David Daley or anybody, really. All right, now I just want to play for you the audio from this hilarious new ad, which is about it's a political ad for the New Jersey gubernatorial campaign, and the guy running against the incumbent, that's Phil Murphy. He's leading the guy who's running against him, Republican, whose name is Chitterelli. Sounds like Chitterelli, by like 8 percentage points. But anyway, here's the ad that is against the Chitterelli guy, and because apparently he tried to outlaw or, I don't know, something about swearing, cursing in the past. I'm not even going to read into it, but here's the ad. It's self-explanatory and pretty funny.
Do you know who this guy is?
No clue.
No. That's Jack Chitterelli, the GOP candidate for governor. He once led an effort to ban swearing.
You're shitting me. He did what?
No f***ing way.
What the f***? Aw, that's kind of nice.
Really?
No. This is fucking New Jersey.
We can't let that win.
Yeah. Very funny. Very funny. Vote for Phil Murphy in New Jersey. All right. Well, that's all I've got for you. A brief segment, opening segment here. And by brief, it's still longer than most of the other daily newscasts. But, you know, I am aggregating a lot of stuff. So you can always count on me for that in this news segment. That's what I try to do is get inside the zeitgeist of what's going on, give you some context, some clips every day here at the top. All right, but now it's time to get to just a rapid fire headlines. Everything else that's left, it's time for the news dump. Let's see what Pete cooked up for a jingle today.
Columbus Day is really dumb, racist, murderous chump. We hope his chlamydia was painful on today's news dump.
Wow, that does sound like he's shrieking from the pain of chlamydia. Well done, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, let's start with good news. 32 countries joined the United States, ours, in a pact developed with the European Union to reduce methane emissions by 30% by 2030. part of an effort to set new targets to slow global warming before a major UN climate summit in Glasgow next month. Methane, of course, the second most prevalent greenhouse gas after carbon dioxide, but much more potent in the short term in its ability to heat the planet. And in a related story, a new study has scientists beginning to be able to paint a clear picture on just how many people will be affected by climate change if current warming trends continue. About 85% of the world's population already lives in areas experiencing the effects of human-induced climate change, according to a new study published in Nature on Tuesday. Researchers in Berlin compiled data from more than 100,000 impact studies analyzing detectable environmental signals of human-induced climate change, finding that the evidence of how climate change is impacting communities is continuing to grow. Read about that at ABC News. And in COVID news, Merck is asking the FDA for emergency authorization for the first pill to treat COVID-19. Advisors to the FDA are meeting on Thursday and Friday to discuss Johnson & Johnson and Moderna boosters. And the number of eligible people in the U.S. still weighing whether to get a COVID vaccine has sharply dwindled, leaving mostly hardcore refusers. In a September vaccine survey from Kaiser Family Foundation, 71% of unvaccinated respondents said the need for booster shots indicated that the vaccines were not working. So the booster campaign is complicating efforts to persuade the unvaccinated to get shots, even though I talked to Peter Hotez yesterday, who said it was always going to be a 3-shot vaccine. But yeah, that could have been a major fault in communication because of the doubt it is sadly creating. Congratulations to my friend Tom Foreman, old buddy at CNN, running the Boston Marathon, and many others. Maybe, I don't know, I wonder if any listeners ran the marathon or attended it. Boston Marathon held for the first time in 30 months. Kenyan runners swept the long-delayed race. Here is the Associated Press with fall foliage replacing the blooming daffodils and mylar blankets, sharing space with masks. The pandemic-delayed Boston Marathon returned Monday after a 30-month absence for a smaller, socially distanced race that ended in a very familiar way, a Kenyan sweep. And also running in that race was the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, to mark Indigenous Peoples Day. She said, "I run because my ancestors gave me this ability," celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day in Boston. And she's been a runner for like 20 years. She wrote an op-ed in the Boston Globe where she also said, "Along the way to running my first marathon, I began to think deeply about the story of my people. I've used running not only to get places, but to preserve their traditions and culture. I run because my ancestors gave me this ability." Okay, what else? Let's see. Oil trading above $80 a barrel, hitting a 7-year high. You're noticing that at the pump if you drive a car that takes gas. Southwest Airlines and its passengers had a really rough weekend. Mentioned this yesterday. The problem spilled into Monday. Airline canceled 2,000 flights Friday through Sunday, amounting to a meltdown in Southwest operations, according to the Dallas Morning News. And on Monday, it canceled about 365 more flights, or roughly 10% of its schedule, delayed another 600. Why the delays? That's where things are getting confusing. Over the weekend, Southwest blamed a combination of bad weather and issues with the staffing of air traffic controllers. In a rare move, the FAA pushed back against that, saying there were no staffing issues in regard to flight controllers. So a lot of confusion about that. Not helping the Southwest brand. Florida, speaking of bad brands, short more than 5,000 teachers. And I will be in Florida working with the Florida Education Association. And here is CNN talking about and quoting my buddy, President, and they call him Adam Spar in this piece. Son of a bitch. Andrew Spar. Come on, I'm the only person that gets names wrong. I don't have editors checking me. It's just me. But anyway, Florida's teacher shortage has worsened since the start of the school year, with vacancies for teachers surging more than 5,000, according to updated data from the FEA. Also, more than 4,000 openings for other school staff positions. And the organization released its initial findings in August. This is really, the Andrew Spar says, these numbers and trends are an alarm bell going off for our public schools, and state officials need to start listening. Educators have made clear why they're leaving our schools, and young people will readily share why they don't want to pursue an education career. I'll learn more and talk more about this week when I am attending the Florida Education Association's annual gathering in Orlando. I'll be in Orlando Wednesday night, folks. Hope to see you if you want to come. I'll be hosting little happy hour after dinner on Wednesday night. Would love to meet folks. Netflix is standing by Dave Chappelle and his new special, which is very controversial for its transphobia, according to some LGBT plus advocates. I'll be talking to a trans woman who has got an awesome YouTube channel called Jessie Earl, on the show tomorrow. Really looking forward to that interview. Lebanon got their power back, but they're only for a couple hours, apparently. Oh, my God. Fuel depletion issues continue in Lebanon. And that, I think, is, that's it. That's all I've got for you on today's news dump, folks. Now it's time to move on, but, of course, got to plug the show and ask you to subscribe if you haven't already. Trying not to do as many ads. Trying to get subscriptions to support this project each and every day. So if you haven't, sign up now. Go to standupwithpete.com or just sign up at patreon.com/Pete Dominic, or go to the paid subscription link in the show notes and sign up to support this podcast. You know, most daily podcasts have like 10 or 15, 20 names they read at the end of every show. This one is just me, and I can't do it without you. It's our show, and I need your support. So sign up now with a subscription for as little as $5. You can always edit your pledge up from 5 to 10 to more. A lot of people are paying a lot more than that monthly, and I can't do it without you. So sign up now. Okay. If you do, you get all these guests and more, access to our happy hour on Thursday, the Discord platform chat anytime, and now it's time to get to Eric Segall. How about that? I got Jack Jenkins coming up. He is a religion reporter who's written a very interesting and important book that I mentioned earlier. Very excited to share his work with you. But first, Segall and I had a great, interesting, tragic, funny, moving chat, as we often do. He called me up, fired up yesterday, ready to rant. And, of course, he is Georgia State University con law professor, the author of 2 books, Supreme Myths and Originalism as Faith, the host of the Supreme Myths podcast, and gaining more and more respect in the academy. Former everything, Eric Segall. I don't know why I said former everything. He worked at the DOJ. I made him sound like a real Renaissance man. The guy can't even build a model airplane, as far as I can tell. But a great friend, a great husband, a great dad, and a real mentor to me. Always great when we chat. Here it is, the latest at eSpinSegall on Twitter. Let's go. Okay, I've got Eric Segall now, and I am recording.
I'm angry.
Yeah, I know. We've been talking for...
This is not Dr. Doom and Gloom. This is Dr. Angry.
Okay, so what's going on? What is on your mind? Have a seat.
Okay. There's a woman named Crystal Clanton. She used to work for a conservative organization run by that great American Charles Kirk. What's his name? First name? Kirk. You must know this guy. Charles Kirk. Anyway, she worked for this organization years ago. In 2017, the New Yorker magazine reported that Turning Point USA is the organization.
Oh, and Charlie Kirk, Turning Point
Charlie
USA.
Kirk, that's right.
Yeah, I know who
Charlie.
Yeah, he's
yes, and the
massive following.
New Yorker reported that they had screenshots. The writer said, "I have a screenshot of this woman, Crystal Clanton, saying, quote, I am now quoting from the New Yorker magazine, which says it's quoting from a screenshot. I hate black people. Like, fuck them all. I hate blacks. End of story." Now, that's 2017. The New Yorker breaks that story, and she resigns from Turning Point USA. Now, I don't know if she resigned or fired. I think she was given the opportunity to resign. I don't know that for a fact. It doesn't matter to how mad I am about all this.
Right.
So she resigns or is fired. And pretty soon thereafter, she's hired by that great American Ginny Thomas, wife of Justice Clarence Thomas. Just pause for a second on that thought. Ginny Thomas hires the woman who says, I hate black people. Like, fuck them all. I hate blacks.
Clarence Thomas, black Supreme Court justice, married to a white woman named Ginny.
Yes, Ginny. Yes, Ginny, Jinny. She hires this person. All right, fine. I mean, we all know what Ginny Thomas is, so we don't have to go into that. She's a Trumper, basically. I mean, we know what she is. Doesn't matter. Then this woman goes to law school. Ask me, Pete, I want you to ask me what law school this woman who said, I hate black people went to.
Georgia State University.
No, sir. We wouldn't let her in. I mean, she applied. We wouldn't.
It's got to be. Is it Liberty?
No, it's the Antonin Scalia School of Law. Used to be George Mason.
Oh, okay.
So how perfect is that?
Does Liberty have a law school? I don't know what
yeah, I believe they do, actually. Yes, I think they do. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't care. So she goes to George Mason, and it's revealed last week that she is. So the Supreme Court is the highest court in the land, even though it's not really a court. We call it the highest court in the land. And then there are 12 Circuit Court of Appeals. And although sometimes the D.C. Circuit is referred to as the second highest court, that's not true. All 11 circuits plus the D.C. Circuit are equal, and they are the next level below the Supreme Court. There's only one court higher than the Courts of Appeals, and that's the Supreme Court. A judge on the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, where I clerked 75 million years ago, but I'm still proud of my time there. And some of the judges I worked for in 1985 are still there, believe it or not. That's true. That's life tenure. But in any event, there's a guy named Pryor, Judge Pryor. There's actually two Pryors. There's a female Jill Pryor, and then another Judge Pryor. They're not related. Judge Pryor is the protege. Hold on.
I'm talking to Pete.
Sorry, Pete.
That's
I'm
okay.
talking to Dominic. No, I'm not been fed. Give me 10 minutes, please.
What
was that? You didn't feed the dogs?
Yeah, sorry about that. You can keep that in. I don't care. So Judge Pryor is the protege of that great American Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions, racist extraordinaire.
Yeah.
He's from Alabama, like Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions, and he hired this woman. It turns out that some of Judge Pryor's clerks go on to clerk for the Supreme Court. Justice Thomas. We see the connections here. Ginny Thomas hired this woman. She sends in the Judge Pryor. Judge Pryor hires her, despite the fact that she said, in case I haven't said this loud enough, quote, I hate black people, like fuck them all. I hate blacks in the story. Now,
she said those horrible things, and then she still got into George Mason. Like, did they know that she? I don't
have personal knowledge. That would disqualify her from Georgia State.
From Georgia State, but would it disqualify her from every law school in the country?
I would hope so if they knew about it. I have no idea if they knew about it.
Okay, all right. Just wondering what the threshold might be.
No, it's a fair question. Now, she did say something when the New Yorker broke the story. What she said was, I don't hate remember
all of them.
Right. She said, I don't remember saying, I'm paraphrasing, but she didn't say I didn't say it. She said, I don't remember saying it. And she said, it doesn't describe who I am, but she did not apologize for it. She did not do a mea culpa, and it doesn't describe who I am. Maybe what she meant by that is instead of who she is hating black people, she really hates black people. But we don't know because she didn't say that there's been no, and by the way, let me be clear about this. I think she was relatively young when she made these statements. If she came out and said, I was an idiot, I was stupid, I was wrong, I apologize, I turned the corner, I'm living a better life, then I have no problem with any success she has in the future. No problem may be strong, but I have little problem with it. If it's a sincere, I was young, I was drunk, I was stupid, fine. But she's not done any of that.
Right.
There's been no apology. And the reason, and most of your audience already knows the story from my Twitter feed. What they don't know, I just put up there in the last hour.
Ruth Marcus writes, in a Washington Post columnist, it gives me no pleasure to focus on this woman who did not respond to requests for comment. I have daughters her age, one of whom happens to be in law school. We all do stupid things when we are young, and some of us do terrible things. We should all allow some space for repentance and forgiveness. But there's no evidence of repentance here, and the reported comments are astonishing in their savagery.
Yes, all of that, and it gets worse. Hold on, it gets worse. So a reporter from an incredibly credible kind of paper in the legal world called both the chief judge of the 11th Circuit and his chambers today. I think it was, maybe yesterday, it was reported today. And Judge Pryor's current position is no comment. So what we have is the protege of Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions, who had his own racial problems, who who has, and Pryor has had some shaky racial things in the past, but I don't want to get into that. I don't care. I don't care about that past. It doesn't matter. He knows now. There's no doubt that he knows what her comments were. He knows she has not apologized. And he is still, and as far as we know so far, she's still hired, and he's not making her do a public mea culpa. He's not saying anything about it. And to be in 2021 America and having the second highest court in the land, a judge on that court, tied for the second highest court in the land, hire a woman who said, I hate black people, like fuck them all, I hate blacks, end of story, and has never said, I'm really sorry about it, or has never said, I didn't say that. What she said was, I don't remember saying, which is a very different statement than I never said it.
I've got more. Ruth Marcus writes in the Washington Post, this was not an isolated outburst. The year after the New Yorker story, the website Mediaite reporting on Clanton's hiring by Ginny Thomas described a Snapchat message featuring, quote, a photo of a man who appears to be Arab and a caption written by Clanton that reads, just thinking about ways to do another 9/11.
Yep. Yep.
So she goes after Arab appearing people as well, as if they're plotting a terrorist attack on Snapchat. Okay.
Now here's why I'm bothering, and here's why I want your audience to know. I asked you if I could rant to you, because I like ranting to you. This is what is so upsetting about this. I don't give one fuck about this woman. I mean, I'm assuming she worked for a terrible organization. She said terrible things. She's continuing not to denounce those terrible things she said. You know, we know there are racists in America. You know, the problem here is an 11th Circuit judge being part of this entire thing, and the connection to Ginny Thomas and Clarence Thomas. Because, there's no non-controversial way to say this. Like, you know me, I don't shy away from controversy. This is controversial, I'm about to say, but I don't know how you can reach any other conclusion than this. Clarence Thomas's jurisprudence is, with the exception of maybe one or two cases, is as bad for African Americans as any modern justice, period, full stop. Justice Clarence Thomas has said, and you and I discussed this before, he said it in a judicial opinion, and he said it at public talks, that the way he was treated at Yale in 1973 was worse than the segregated South. Now, listen, I have no doubt Clarence Thomas was condescended to, treated miserably, and was probably a very tough environment for any black person in 1973 New Haven, Connecticut at Yale Law School. I have no doubt about that. But you know what? He got to drink the water fountains as the white people. He got to eat in the same cafeteria as the white people. There was no segregation in New Haven in 1973 under law. His grandfather's house had crosses burned up on it. He grew up in the segregated South. Why this man would equate condescension at privileged, elite, white Yale Law School with growing up in the poor rural South. And I don't like to second guess, I'm not a black person. I don't like to second guess this, but he doesn't, and this is the controversial part of this, I don't think he likes black people. I mean, I don't think Thomas likes.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I don't.
That's not, sadly, a thing that doesn't exist. I mean, there's been a lot written and said about that.
I don't want to get that much into that. Let's focus on Judge Pryor. I mean, the problem is Pryor's connections to Thomas are very strong. I mean, that's the problem. That's why Thomas is involved.
Which is the judge that is on the blank circuit where she is clerking.
11th Circuit. Yes, 11th Circuit.
He's on the 11th Circuit. She is now, this woman who is quoted.
She'll be clerking for him next year. The way it works is you get the job during law school and then you clerk afterwards. And it's a really, by the way, Pete, the other thing your audience needs to know is getting a clerkship with any court of appeals in this country, getting any federal clerkship, even the level below that, the trial courts, but forget the trial courts. Getting a clerkship with a court of appeals judge is incredibly hard, incredibly difficult, and they have their choice of everybody, especially. There are circuit court judges in Montana. There are circuit court judges in rural Mississippi, et cetera, et cetera. And this guy's in Alabama, but the 11th Circuit sits in Atlanta. A lot of people want these jobs. And the reason I'm so mad about this is because the 11th Circuit sits in Atlanta. I mean, that's my hometown. And so what happens now? Judge Pryor comes to Atlanta with this law clerk who says she hates black people. and he has a case involving black people. Like, what happens at that moment? If I'm a lawyer, aren't you? What other people have said on Twitter and other places is, I'm making a motion to recuse. You can't hear a case involving a black person. You hired someone who you knew said, I hate black people.
You think that would be a legitimate thing for lawyers?
He will not recuse. But what do you think? He hired someone who he knows said, I hate black. Again, if she comes out and says, I was young, I was stupid, I was wrong, I regret it. Oh my God, I can't believe how stupid I was. Okay, we all get second chances. Everybody gets second chances. I don't believe in cancel culture. Here's what I do believe in: Court of Appeals judges not hiring people as law clerks who said, I hate black people. How hard is that a thing to do? I mean, come on. How are we living in this world? Then just gave me a look. I'm really mad. I don't. By the way, this should fucking Washington Post did a great two stories on this. This should be the front page of the New York Times. Headline: 11th Circuit judge hires woman who says, I hate black people. Like, why isn't this a bigger story?
What should happen?
Like, one of two things should happen. Either Pryor comes out and says, I made a mistake and I'm sorry. And then, okay, we all make mistakes. Or she comes out and says, I'm just so embarrassed and ashamed, and I wish I'd never
don't hate black people. I love R. Kelly.
And I don't hate black people would be nice. A statement that I don't hate black people, that would be nice.
That would be the beginning.
That would be the minimum.
Just
that
the
would be
start.
The
even if we all knows, even if we all knows she doesn't mean a word of it, it would be a start.
It would be a start. Saying I don't remember and it's not who I am, no, that's not it. Especially when all external evidence suggests is exactly who you are.
What about the statement like, I have no problem with the black people I know? Would that suffice?
No.
It's
I mean,
it's
a crazy story. Isn't it a crazy story?
You've been on it on social media. Have you written? Yeah. You haven't written anything about it.
I haven't written a blog post yet, but I'm thinking about it.
Well,
I mean, the problem is I can't do a whole lot better. So here's the thing: the Washington Post has covered this really well. So I can't do better than the Washington Post. What I can do though is give an insight into the clerking world that the Washington Post does not talk about. And Pete, you have to understand how these days to clerk for conservative judges. Now there are hundreds of conservative judges. To clerk for them is almost like you have to check the Federalist Society box. You have to be connected to Federalist Society or Heritage. I mean, it's really gotten. And by the way, the same is less true, but somewhat true of liberal judges and the American Constitution Society. But here's my point: like Pryor's, I'm sure he was a member of the Federalist Society. I have no idea if he still is. I know he was for sure. Where are they on this? Like, why have we heard nothing from the Federalist Society on this? Like, I don't. Why aren't other law professors? I'm like the only law professor.
I think because they hate black people too.
I mean, that's the problem, right?
I think that the issue here is that not the Overton window, but the conversation about race in America has been liberated to the point where white racist folks can get away with a lot more in certain places and spaces, not in every. And it's a fascinating.
But this has never been one of those places.
I think that's the thrust of your passion. That this is you're screaming because this is we haven't seen this.
It's a new low.
New low.
I mean, we saw this in 1890 probably.
Well, right. Yeah, but we understood progress meant that we were at a point where you couldn't say I hate black people, all of them, and then not retract it, apologize for it.
By the way, end of story. She said it twice. Once again, the direct quote.
Yeah.
I hate black people, like fuck them all.
Yeah.
Ellipses. I hate blacks. End of story.
Well, you can't imagine in law school teaching any kind of case where, there would be someone would need to recuse themselves based on statements like this, because it would be too on the nose to say that quote. It would be more like you need to recuse yourself because you worked on this or that, or you were involved with this or that. But to have someone clerking who has said that, and you already said it, you don't want that person judging black people doing anything for any type of case, civil, criminal, anything.
Right. And by the way, for the record, this part is legally, I admit, questionable. But for the record, the United States Constitution, Article 3, says federal judges, shall stay in office, quote, during good behavior. It doesn't say life tenure. It says during good behavior. Now, I've conceded to you before. As an historical matter, they meant life tenure when they said good behavior, pretty much. I think that's the overwhelmingly dominant view of historians. Nevertheless, this is not fucking good behavior. All judges, all federal judges. Yeah. All
right.
trials,
So is there more?
Yes, there is. So I've talked to you before about my oldest friend from high school, who is a PhD in epidemiology from Johns Hopkins, and he's done a lot of COVID work. You know, I've talked about him before, and he's really smart and really well informed. He's a non-lawyer. So I just want to tell you the conversation I had with him, because I think it's relevant to this. So I called him to rant about. He's my oldest friend. So I to rant about this story, and he let me rant like you do for 5 or 10 minutes, and then he said to me something, and it really hit me hard, because A, he's a very close friend. I've known him forever, and B, I think he's right, and I don't want him to be right. Like, I don't want his response to me to be right, and now I'm thinking, he's probably right. His point to me was, and we can do this because we're close friends, and he was talking to me like you and I talk, like, no holds barred. We've been friends a long time. He said, Eric, you're so naive. Like, don't you think Judge Pryor is a racist? Because he knows about Judge Pryor. Don't you think he's a racist? Like, what? Why would you think that he's not a racist?
Well, but I don't love that because racists have been able to exist and succeed in modern day America by hiding their racism, and that's
right.
the difference is that this is not.
No. Then he went on to say, he didn't let me finish. Then he went on to say, it's his view. I don't want to believe this, Pete, but it's his view that roughly 30% of America, maybe it's 27, maybe it's 33, but whatever, roughly 30% of America would have no problem with segregation coming back. And maybe some of them would have very little problem with slavery. And that's what I don't want to believe. Like, that's what I don't want to believe.
I don't know these percentages and what the question is.
But when this kind of story breaks, and
the reaction,
it makes me wonder how many people are thinking to themselves, "Yeah, I hate black people too."
Yeah.
No, that was his reaction. And it's a really sad reaction to me. Like, I don't want to believe this about America. I don't. In 2021, of course,
I don't know how you can't believe it. I'm not like
that's what he said. That's exactly what he said. Yes, Pete. That's the sentence. Eric, how can you not believe this?
Like, listen, I don't want to be a jerk to you.
You're not a jerk. Yeah.
But
I'm a naive little puppy.
No, like, if you talked a lot, and I feel like I don't know how much you're talking to black people.
A lot, a fair amount. I mean,
you're reading them and you're following them on social and stuff, but like, I don't know. Black Twitter on this is. I'd love to know where Black Twitter is on this woman. I haven't. I
didn't know there was a Black Twitter.
Well, see, that's your problem.
Right, maybe that is my problem.
Well, Black Twitter is simply just black people on Twitter.
Well, but I have a lot of I do that a lot. I mean,
so it's not like
I talk about race a lot. I write about race all the time.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah. I'm just saying.
I mean, but this is isn't this a level different than anything you've seen recently? A federal judge hiring a law clerk who said, "I hate black people."
I think each one of these cases is a very important. Each one of these issues is important in terms of what it means for that cultural quadrant, the legal world, the sports world, which of course you can talk extensively about sports and race and entertainment. I think it's regional. I think it's age.
But that's interesting that you said, Pete. Oh, hold on a second. It's fascinating you made that connection. So,
regional
friend of mine.
This wouldn't happen at certain other circuit courts. That's for sure.
Friend of mine writes a book on the old Boston Celtics, Bill Russell and Bob Cousy, two of the greatest NBA players of all time. Obviously, one white, Bob Cousy, one black, Bill Russell. And it's really a book about race, because this guy also wrote the book Where Peachtree Meets Sweet Auburn, about race in Atlanta. It's not sports at all. It's the best book on race in Atlanta.
What's his name again? You told me about
Gary Pomerantz. Gary Pomerantz. Anyway,
right.
So, but here's a connection I want to draw. Bob Cousy was the second great NBA player. George Mikan, a white guy, was the first. Bob Cousy, a white guy, is the second. Then Bill Russell comes Will Chamberlain. Here's the point. Bill Russell didn't, and Bob Cousy didn't give interviews for decades, and Bill Russell isn't healthy. For this book, what Bob Cousy said, and he gave Gary like 15 interviews or 30 interviews or something, which is amazing because he didn't used to give interviews, was I am so embarrassed about how I acted in the 1960s. My black teammates had to go through the segregated South, like, you know, where they sometimes played games, in Kentucky specifically. And, you know, they couldn't eat in the restaurants. They couldn't stay in the same hotels. It was terrible. And I just stood by. And I will never forgive myself for it. And I can't make it up to him. And, you know, okay, then that's all good. You know, I wish you had done better in 1964, but you recognize it. You've owned it after all these years, and you're doing a mea culpa. And maybe you should have done it sooner. But okay, this woman needs to do that. I mean, Jesus Christ. All right, I'm done ranting. Thank you, Pete.
All right, so just real quick while I got you, what do you make of if you're not paying close attention, then you don't know the whiplash that has taken place regarding the abortion issue in Texas. The Texas legislature passes this law preventing women from getting abortions after 6 weeks. Then a few weeks later, a federal court judge puts like a stay on it. What's it called? And says, you know, this is
injunction,
and this is unconstitutional, clearly. And then it's
not a final decision. It's just a preliminary ruling. This law doesn't have legal effect until we have a full trial, a full hearing, et cetera, et cetera.
And then the Ninth,
the Fifth Circuit comes in and relieves.
The Ninth Circuit on this past weekend. Fifth Circuit. Excuse me. My apologies to the Ninth.
Yes.
The Fifth Circuit comes in this weekend and says and reverses that federal court judge. And so, I guess, what do we need to know about the Fifth Circuit?
Well, I mean, it is the most. It is I don't know if it's the most conservative circuit, but it's the most conservative circuit that matters. And it's Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana, and there are several judges on there. One of them is named Judge Ho, H-O, who is to the right of I don't know, to the right of Clarence Thomas by 2 standard deviations. He's really the worst. But there are a bunch of judges on that circuit like that. This circuit has been, up until recently, challenging the Supreme Court on its abortion jurisprudence. What I mean by that is, you and I have talked for years and years about these stupid requirements that family planning clinics and abortion clinics and Planned Parenthood clinics had to meet the physical requirements for hospitals instead of outpatient surgery centers, which they couldn't do because it's too expensive, and admitting privileges for doctors. That all came out of the Fifth Circuit. And after the Supreme Court struck that down, Mississippi enacted the same law, and the Fifth Circuit upheld it. And that's when Justice Roberts, for the first time in his career ever, voted to uphold an abortion law, voted to strike down an abortion law, because of the precedent. In other words, the court ruled 1 year, you can't do this. Mississippi did exactly that 6 months later. And then the Fifth Circuit upheld that, which was insane because it was direct. And the Supreme Court reversed, saying, wait a minute, we just told you this is unconstitutional. What are you doing? It's a very conservative circuit. But I really so this happened to me once before and I got in big trouble. But I'm going to say it again. There are a million things to worry about when it comes to abortion and the Supreme Court. This Texas law is not one of them. This Texas law will not stay. The Supreme Court will not allow that law to stay because it takes power away from courts. Basically, what this law says is if you, an individual person, a private person, want to sue somebody who helps a woman get an abortion, you can sue them, and if you win, you get $10,000. And if it's a clinic, you can get an injunction against them doing any more abortions. But no prosecutor, no jail time. They passed the law in a way that makes it very hard to challenge. So that Texas law I just described, abortion is illegal after 6 weeks, which is completely inconsistent with Supreme Court case law. And no state official is going to be involved in this. Private people can sue and get $10,000 and get an injunction against future abortions. You could write the same law about free speech. Texas could say, if you see somebody talking about Joe Biden in a complimentary way, you can sue that person and get $10,000 and get an injunction against that person doing it again. And the same technical standing issues and jurisprudential issues would come up, and the Supreme Court's not going to allow that because it takes courts out of guaranteeing constitutional rights. They're never going to allow it. The Texas thing is a misdirection. It is a sleight of hand.
Right.
The case people need to focus on is the 15-week Mississippi abortion ban. Now, having said that, don't get me wrong. There are women in Texas today who can't get abortions, and that's terrible, and that's because of that law. It's a one-year thing. It's not going to be the end game. The end game is the Mississippi case involving a 15-week ban on abortion. But it's another example of the Fifth Circuit acting like incredible jerks. And by the way, the Supreme Court could have stepped into this too, and they didn't. That was so. But that's a temporary thing. They claim to us for technical reasons, and in fact, even Justice Alito has recently ranted about how the court did say that Texas law is very questionable on the merits, but there are procedural challenges. Don't worry about it, people. Don't worry about it. I mean, worry about it today in Texas on abortion. Long term, that's not where the law is going, and the court won't allow it to go there.
Right.
What they are going to allow is a 15-week ban on abortions, which is about 8 weeks before viability or 10 weeks before viability. That's what they are going to allow, and that's going to be, that's a different conversation. The Fifth Circuit is really, really, really bad. I mean, and by the way, so the 11th Circuit used to be part of the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit used to be the entire South. And this is what's so. I'm going to get really serious for 1 minute. The old Fifth Circuit, which included Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, all the South, in the 1960s, judges on that circuit had their houses, had their personal lives threatened, their families threatened. Some even got their houses attacked because they were enforcing desegregation orders. Because the Supreme Court never really did that, Pete. The Supreme Court decided Brown and then kind of got out of the business. And it fell to the lower court. And these were heroes. There's books about this. One of them, Judge Frank Johnson, I've met a few times. I knew. True American hero. Another one, Elbert Tuttle. True American hero. These were all Fifth Circuit judges. They eventually divided the Fifth Circuit in two because it was too big, and that's where the 11th Circuit comes from. So going full circle now, this Judge Pryor, who hired this woman who says, I hate black people, is effectively working for the same court that was instrumental to, under the law, desegregating the South in the 1960s at great personal cost. So we had civil rights heroes in Texas, in Alabama, in Mississippi. Frank Johnson is from Alabama. Frank Johnson is a hero. There's a book about him. He absolutely braved, his personal life was threatened because he wanted to desegregate the South. And now Judge Pryor is hiring a woman who says she hates black people. It's almost too much to bear. I mean, the historical legacy of the Fifth Circuit is really important.
All right. Well, I want to read all about that and learn all about that, but I don't want to end on such a low point. So you did get a new guinea pig. What can you tell us?
I have a great story. I have a funny story. I do. You can, when I finish, you can edit this out or not. You can decide after I tell the story. Saturday night, we used to have 3 guinea pigs. 2 died. We're down to 1 guinea pig. My wife had guinea pigs before we had children. My wife had guinea pigs her entire adult life. So this is a Lynn thing, not a kid's thing. We had 3 guinea pigs. We had 2 guinea pigs. Then we had awkward transition, but let's end it on a light note. Then we had 1 guinea pig. Then we had 1 guinea pig. Friend calls Lynn, a really good friend calls her and says, a neighbor of mine found this animal. We think it's a guinea pig, but we're not sure. We don't know where she came from.
God.
She seems homeless. So Lynn goes over there, and it is in fact a cute little gray guinea pig who's homeless. So Lynn decides to bring the guinea pig home. This all happens on Saturday. Saturday at 6:00 at night, both Lynn and my children are fawning over this guinea pig. They love this guinea pig. It was totally fine with me for this guinea pig to arrive at the house. Lynn knew I kind of put a limit on more heartbeats in our house with 2 dogs and birds and all that stuff. We just had a dog. We had a bird die last week, and my youngest daughter was very upset about it. But this guinea pig, it's not. And we have 1 guinea pig. Why not have 2 guinea pigs? Right? It's all the same. So they play with this guinea pig all night. Incredibly cute. And this is, I have to say, I have buried 7 guinea pigs in my life.
My Lord in heaven, sir.
I have lived with a lot of
You're
guinea
the
pigs.
guinea pig great. Are they all in the same place? Are they in the guest house? Where are they?
They are. I don't have a guest house, but they're in the garden in the back. Yes, we have a Stephen King memorial to guinea pigs in the back. It's like Pet Cemetery. It's like There are 5 guinea pigs buried there and 2 guinea pigs buried someplace else. When Sarah and Kai, my daughter Katie Kai, were little, they once tried to dig up a dead guinea pig because they were curious, but Lynn stopped them in time. Anyway,
oh my
we have
God.
a new guinea pig. It's all good. It's all great. Lynn and I watch TV in our TV room, and occasionally, as people are prone to do, people fall asleep I don't fall asleep. Lynn falls asleep down there. Lynn fell asleep. The guinea pig's in the cage. It's a huge cage, Pete. Huge cage. A huge cage. She leaves the top open because guinea pigs can't crawl out of this cage. It's just too big.
Yeah.
I go to bed. Happy family, happy guinea pig. Happy guinea pig, happy family. I wake up at 7:45 in the morning, and Lynn is almost in tears. The guinea pig is gone.
What?
And I'm like, what? And she says the guinea pig is gone. What are you saying? What do you mean it's gone? It's gone. I can't find her anywhere. The old guinea pig named Peeps is still there. All of Lynn's guinea pigs are named after candies.
Is that right?
Skittles,
after candy?
Yes.
Huh.
Yeah, all of them. Or sweets, after sweets. Twizzler, etc. Anyway, so the guinea pig is fucking gone. And we're looking everywhere. And we can't find the guinea pig. And Sweeney, my yellow lab, one of my 2 labs, had taken my labs play with guinea pigs all the time.
They do. The dogs play with the rodents.
But they're not rodents, they're guinea pigs. But anyway.
What do you mean? I'm sorry?
So wait. So Sweeney had taken an interest in this new guinea pig that we hadn't seen before. It was kind of weird. Not a violent interest, just an interest. Like really sniffing her and looking for her and obsessing about her. Anyway, the guinea pig is gone. And we can't find her anywhere. And we can't figure out how she got out of the cage. We can't figure out anything. And Lynn is beside herself. My children are beside themselves. And it's a terrible day. And we can't find the guinea pig. And Lynn, who loves, the only thing she loves more than guinea pigs are dogs, is looking at Sweeney like, we knew Sweeney wouldn't eat the guinea pig, but on 3 different occasions, Sweeney has brought birds into this house in his mouth, one of whom was alive. So we're thinking that maybe Sweeney put the guinea pig in his mouth and took her outside our doggy. We have a doggy door they come in and out of. That we didn't know. And then Lynn started this thing where she thought Sweeney looked guilty. So she was like mad at Sweeney all day. And we didn't know what was going on. And it was terrible. And everybody was sad. Last night, we decided to take apart the couch because Lynn is convinced the guinea pig is in the couch, like inside the couch, like not under the couch. Like
why
inside
did she think the guinea pig's in the couch?
I don't know why she thinks that.
No,
I never
you do
figured that
know.
out.
Did you hear a noise?
No, I don't know. No, I don't know.
Where is she?
So she's making dinner. So we take apart the couch. No guinea pig. Because we had taken apart the couch, we had made a huge mess in the room. In this room is a 5-foot tall box. It's 5 feet. I'm 5'7". This box is up to like my chin almost.
A 5 foot tall what?
Box.
Just
box.
An empty box?
No, a box of guinea pig shavings, closed, totally closed, like sealed, not sealed with tape, but closed on the top.
I'm sorry.
5 foot.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Do you have a 5 foot tall box filled with the fur, the hair of past?
No. There's guinea pig shavings that you put in the cage.
Shavings, the wood shavings for the cage.
Wood shavings.
You have
not
a
wood,
5 foot
tape.
box of.
Yes.
I thought you meant of guinea pig. Like
have I mentioned that I've buried 7 guinea pigs? Do you know
Listen, you guys sound pretty eccentric, but whatever. I'm not judging. I mean, I didn't know. I also did not know that you had a bird as a pet, and that's deeply.
2. Now we have. We had 2. Now we have 1.
Either way, it really changing a lot of how I feel about your family. But continue. So we all are really on the edge here. What happened?
So
next?
we moved so that our playroom, which you've seen, you witnessed guinea pig races in the playroom.
I did.
You not, personally?
Yes, I was there for them, and
yes.
I did harshly judge your family. Go ahead.
So this box has now been kind of pushed aside because we've taken apart the couch for reasons I still don't understand and will never understand for the rest of my life. I love my wife very much. I don't know why we took apart this couch. Her theory was the guinea pig was inside the couch, like somehow in the interior of the couch.
God, I wish we had audio of that to cut to.
So the next thing I know, Lynn opens the sealed box of guinea pig shavings, and there is Kit Kat, the new guinea pig, sitting in this box on top of the shavings. Now, we turned our fucking house upside down. Alive. Like, why? Where have you been? Why haven't you rescued me?
How much time had she been missing? Kit Kat. I don't know the gender.
At least since 7:30 a.m.
So not a full day. Kit Kat
12 hours. This was 7:30.
Okay.
This was actually close to 7:30 o'clock. Yeah.
Do you have a photo you could share of the box? This is hard. This is tough to believe that you have a 5-foot tall box of wood shavings in your house, which is a place where rodents would want to go and live. And it would be like, I don't know much, but I would check that box before the couch. Before the couch.
First, I said to them like 17 times, why didn't you look in the box? And because Pete, you have to understand, we have 2 dogs. They poop a lot. They poop a lot in our backyard.
I've been to your house. It would seem that there's not a lot of people picking it up out there.
I searched every inch of our backyard for this guinea pig, thinking that Sweeney had taken the guinea pig out, probably killed it, and taken it outside.
It was in that box the whole time. This box
is next to this box is physically next to the guinea pig cage.
It's so. You're a constitutional law professor, well known and well respected.
She's a business. Why are you putting this on me?
In the academy. And the other day, Miranda Yaver, said I'm teaching Eric Segal's book Originalism and Faith. But she's got to know, and everybody's got to know. You spend a tremendous amount of time looking for guinea pigs in your yard. It's bizarre, sir. Bizarre.
I just don't understand how she got in the box. The box was sealed.
Well, I don't understand that you didn't check the natural habitat of the guinea pig first. The fact that Lynn took apart the couch is really something that needs to be followed up on the next episode of whatever we're calling this saga.
All right. I want to be clear about 2 things. First,
you're launching a network for guinea pig lovers.
Everything I said about the guinea pig is true. And I would never have told this story had we not found the guinea pig. Luckily, it has a happy ending. So now we're back to 2 guinea pigs, one named Peeps and one named Tic Tac. And now there's some concern they may not get along very well, but I'll keep you posted on that saga as we go. So I want to be clear, the guinea pig story is 100% true. Second, I do not want us to lose track of what this phone call was really about.
Well, listen, at this point, if people are still listening, they know. Listen, this is a great kind of impromptu conversation for us to tape, because there's really nothing worse than a person who openly states some horrific racist hatred and then is successful. And so what we did here is we then moved on to something which is so light and fun and funny and 100% worth listening to. And someone commented, several people commented on how great our last discussion was. This tops it. Because
I want to leave you with one more image.
Well, I just want to thank Kit Kat for.
I want to leave you with one more image. Lynn and I were heading. Lynn and I and the kids were heading to a vacation, and we had a house sitter come to the house because we had a dog at the time. We needed a house. I mean, guinea pigs and we had 3 guinea pigs, 2 birds, and 2 dogs. So the house sitter came, and as we were going to leave for our flight, the guinea pig died, and the house sitter had to deal with that situation, which was putting it in a shoebox and leaving it in the shoebox until we got back from our trip, which we did. I buried the guinea pig.
You left the guinea pig in a box. How long was your trip for? Gross.
I buried the guinea pig in the backyard, not in the garden where the other 5 are. How long was it
dead? Just rotted?
Hold on, let me finish the story. Like I buried it in a different place than where the other 5 are buried. This is before 4 of them had died.
Graveyard.
I buried them outside of Lynn's office. Actually, that's where the softest. That's where the softest ground was. Wait. So Lynn has this office, and this is when she was working. This is when she was working for Accenture and working from home 100%. Before COVID and everything, she basically worked from home. This is like 6 years ago. So Lynn is on a work call, very important work call, and I'm at work, and it's after school. And she sees out of the corner of her eye, both Sarah and my daughter, Katie, heading towards the place where I buried, I think Taffy was the name of that guinea pig, where I buried Taffy. And they had those little kid shovels. You know, we used to get, they were like 7 and 5. They had those kid shovels and pails. And Lynn said, hold on to the client she was talking to, and ran outside and said, what are you doing? And they said, we're gonna dig up Taffy. We want to see what a dead guinea pig looks like in the ground. And Lynn said, no, you can't do that. I'm very sorry. Which I'm not sure is the parenting decision I would have made, but nevertheless, it's a reasonable parenting.
They went out to dig up one of the dead guinea pigs. Without you weren't. Yes. I'm sorry. Were you there for that?
I wasn't home.
Okay,
no, I
so
heard
this
about
was
this
their independent idea. They wanted to see what the guinea. They wanted to check in. Wow, that's really I think that's impressive. I like that they did that. I do.
I don't even know what to make. But my image is Lynn seeing this on a call.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a good image of Lynn looking at.
Pardon me, my children. Are outside trying to dig up my dead guinea pig. Now, the first follow-up, the corporate folks at Accenture and all humans that are adults say is, I'm sorry, you have guinea pigs? And then Lynn has to explain her lifelong relationship with this.
Now, to be fair to Lynn, what she would say to you is, this is not quite as funny, but in context, maybe it'll be funny.
Mm-hmm.
Lynn wanted a dog as a kid, and her parents wouldn't get her a dog. And then she wanted a horse, and they wouldn't get her a horse.
Yeah.
But they would get her guinea pigs. And she's had guinea pigs since she was in high school. That's Lynn's story.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have that story, but usually it ends with, and then they got a guinea pig, and then they're like, okay, I'm good.
Well,
thank you.
Pete, there is the whole...
They don't keep getting guinea pigs.
There is the whole engagement story, which is the best guinea pig story ever.
Oh, you proposed to you. It really is the best. You go ahead. It never gets old. Go ahead, and then we'll...
Okay. So, Lynn and I met, fell in love very quickly. We had both been divorced, and we knew we wanted to start a family. So, for a lot of complicated reasons, I needed to propose in a certain time and place, and which was basically at her house with her lying on her couch in a sweatshirt. And I came in to propose, and I had no doubt we were in love and going to get married. And I started my proposal, and I'm very serious, and I had the ring. And Lynn looks at me and goes, with a very serious face, "Can you pause for a minute?" And I'm like, okay. She said, "Are you proposing to me?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, in a very serious face, "There's something I have to tell you." And Pete, my heart sank to to my toes. And I was like, holy fuck, did I misread this situation? Like, is there something coming out now that I didn't know? I mean, we were really, this, you knew me at the time. I mean, my time, but we were really in love. I mean, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? Oh my God. And she says, "Eric, I have a guinea pig in my shirt."
You're proposing to your wife and she had a guinea pig in her shirt, which makes no sense. And it's just, it's disturbing. But every time I've heard that story, I've wanted to tell you my truth. And I feel like it's time you deserve to know it. And I think everybody deserves to know it.
Okay, for the record, I want your audience to know this. When we finish this, in 1 minute, we're going to finish after we hear your truth. And then I'm going to go down and I'm going to say to Lynn, I told the proposal story on Pete's show. Is it okay if he keeps it in? If she says, no, you're taking it out.
No, you've told that story on this show several times. Too late, buddy.
No, I haven't. I've never told that story. I don't think so.
I think you have.
I'm sure I have not. You just heard it because you've heard me tell it. Go ahead. What's your truth?
Well, when I proposed to Val, I had a gerbil in my ass.
That's not the same thing as having a guinea pig in your shirt.
It's not at all.
Because guinea pigs like to be in dark covered places. And by the way, this new guinea pig spent a considerable amount of her time in Lynn's shirt on Saturday.
Why did she put the guinea pig in her shirt?
I don't know. And now I have to go ask permission, and she's going to say no.
Tell her, then I'll have to work editing this out. And it was so great and beautiful. And,
all right, let me go. I'm a good husband. Let me get permission.
Okay.
And I hope your audience hears the story.
If she says yes, just text me the words Kit Kat.
You got it. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye.
All right, I got confirmation from Segall that I could share all of that, and so I'm so glad that I could, because that was a really funny way to end it. Hope you appreciated that conversation and that controversy. I think it was enlightening. As always, love talking with Segall. Always great. At eSpin Segall, his podcast getting better all the time. Supreme Myths, check that out as well. And now I'm very excited to introduce you to a first-timer here on the show. He is a reporter, really old school, great reporter, but young guy, but old school reporter doing journalism the old school way. And I really respect him a lot. He's award-winning journalist, national reporter for Religion News Service, and his new book is now out in paperback, came out last year, titled American Prophets, The Religious Roots of Progressive Politics and the Ongoing Fight for the Soul of the Country. He's on Twitter at Jack M. Jenkins. Please let him know you heard him here, and check out his website, jackjenkins.me. My first conversation, hopefully not my last, with a really brilliant guy, the author of an excellent new book, Jack Jenkins. Welcome to Stand Up. And I can already tell you, Jack Jenkins is very patient. You are a journalist, you're a reporter. I pretend to be one, but you're a real one. And thank you for being so kind through technical difficulties, all of which were my fault. Sorry about that.
No worries. I've been there.
Lots to talk about with you. I'm really excited to have you on. Really excited reading your book, learning a lot. Your work is so relevant, but I just wanted you to talk a little bit about how you started covering this stuff, several years ago, how you got on the beat, and specifically of kind of covering the religious left, which is not just Christians.
Yeah, no, I mean, the religious left only exists as an interfaith entity at this point in American history in 2021. It's a coalition of coalitions, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
As for how I got into it, I mean, one of the interesting things I mentioned this a little bit in my book, that back when I interned at Religion News Service, where I currently work, I got assigned to write a story on Occupy Wall Street. This is back in 2011. And I was in Boston at the time and was covering the Boston iteration of that movement. And, I was certainly aware that people were religious and people of faith who are Democrats or progressives or liberals. But this idea that they could be this palpable force was really impressed upon me when I showed up at this Occupy Wall Street gathering. And like a significant percentage of the people who were there, who were helping organize it, were divinity school students, seminary students, and professors from religious institutions. And it was just notable to me how present they were at this location, to the point where, the vague awareness I had of these communities shifted into this awareness that was like, oh, this is an organized group of people that often don't get acknowledged. And a few years later, I ended up working at Think Progress as their one and only religion reporter. And what was fascinating to me during that time period is that there would be these events organized by, for lack of a better term, religious left organizers. These were, things pushing for immigration reform, things for pushing back against climate change. And they get a decent turnout in terms of people of faith who are concerned about these issues and and wanting to put their faith into practice. And I might be the only reporter there. Usually it was me and one or two other reporters who were covering it at all. And I was struck by that because, and oftentimes they weren't even religion reporters. They were, an immigration reporter that was showing up to where activists were, right? And asking other people questions about how to cover the faith element of this. And so as I continued to write for Think Progress, I found over and over and over again that this interest in this topic from readers who, one, felt that this movement had gone uncovered for so long. And two, I started to notice these stories, these moments of influence that the religious left has had and is having on American politics that people just haven't been paying attention to.
Yeah, you did great work at Think Progress. I love that blog. I checked it every day, all day, as a matter of fact, and a big fan of everybody who worked there, whether for a short or long period of time. But just a quick word on what your thought is on why corporate media news agencies don't invest more in covering religion from a more objective standpoint. I think like you do, much less covering the religious left more. Like, do you have any thoughts on why that's not more invested, more resource? Because it's not like there's a shortage of folks identify that way. And I mean, I have no idea, but I would think there'd be some demand for it.
So this is a fantastic question, and I'll try to distill the myriad. So religion reporters are really interested in this question, as you can imagine. We're not advocates except for our own employment. And so we asked this question a lot. We've seen some outlets expand into this. I mean, one of the interesting things after the 2016 election is that the editor-in-chief of the New York Times said, they had a fantastic religion reporter at the Times, but the editor-in-chief said that was a theme that they had kind of missed in the 2016 election. And they've since expanded their coverage in a significant way. Some outlets like the Washington Post have had teams of 2 or 3 for several years, but these mainstream outlets often, it's MSNBC, CNN, even Fox News actually to some degree, don't often have dedicated religion reporters who that's their beat at all times. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One of them is that I think the religious right actually was fairly successful in the 90s of, putting forth the idea that when it comes to religion and politics, conservative iterations of that, particularly conservative Christian iterations of that, are the ones that quote unquote matter the most. And so I think that became a lens through which political reporting was understood, is that if you're covering conservatives, you might find that faith angle. If you're covering liberals, the whole point is to not find it, that might be not a part of the calculus. That's what differentiates them from from the right. And there is an element to which there are certainly more, people who are unaffiliated with the religion or atheist or agnostic among the left than you might find in the right. But the religious part never really went away. So I think there just was a missed story that may or may not have been directly influenced by the political happenings of the 80s and 90s.
I mean, you would think that the part of it is because how much do folks who identify as religious and progressive influence policy, influence campaigns and campaign finance, whereas the religious right, they for a long time have had a huge influence on policy and campaigns. And we can talk about why, as you're the guy to discuss that. But you make a really important point, I think, about how we should be careful, as we always want to make things binary, black and white, this and that, right and left, that the religious left is not, I think you say, like a mirror image of the religious right. That's a really important, it's amorphous, and it's always ever changing, you say. And I think it's hard for people to understand the nuance that you are so good at presenting about this, but super important to try to understand the religious left differently than the religious right. And you can talk about this. You could give a lecture for hours, I'm sure. So give me some interesting points.
Well, I mean, I think the basic thing that's helpful to understand about looking at the religious left is, I used this term earlier, coalition of coalitions. That's arguably how the left in general works at this point in 2021. And some of the critiques that you often hear lobbed at the religious left, that it's anemic, that it's not actually that influential, that it can't get its act together to get something done, are almost verbatim the same critiques that we hear lobbed at the left in general. Right. And so I think it's a difficult thing for a reporter to cover. So because if you're covering the religious right, at least for a while there, 90s and 2000s, there were a series of organizations and leaders that you could call that had a communications director, and they would get back to you and you could understand it. The religious left often crops up around certain issues. They're often protest-based as opposed to, this large, broad political machine that the religious right helped build. And that can be more difficult to cover, and can sometimes reporters can run into a scenario where they cover the end product of a movement as if it was inevitable, as if it was like a hurricane that swept through. And they don't unlog all the activism that happened along throughout that time period. And so I think that's the key thing to help understand, is that the religious left, like the left in general, is more religiously complex. It's more racially complex. Gender identities and geography matter a lot. And so in a way that on the religious right, there's more uniformity. There's more, at least recognized organizations and figures that can make it more simple to cover.
Yeah, really important to try to understand. They're so different, and the influences are also much different as well. But you cover that. You talk about the influences, the religious left. I mean, I think most people know about the religious right and their influences, and we can talk about those, and you cover those. But I would like to focus on, I think, what you're doing best in the entire country, covering the religious left, who it is, how they are influencing, as well as in your book, talking about who the players are. And you've interviewed them and you've covered them all. And so talk to me, specifically on issues. I'd love to talk through just a couple on where they've influenced. But one thing I've said a lot for a long time, and I want you to, tell me if this is wrong, if it's too simple, is that on the issue of immigration, religious folks are generally on the same page, or at least they were, in terms of the way religious folks saw immigration. I think one point I always learned was that it was always Christian organizations in America that did most of the refugee resettlement in this country for the history of the country. How has religious Americans, how are they seeing the issue of immigration? Is that changing based on Trump, I think, bringing out the virulent racism within the Christian right that was, I think, to some extent obvious to a lot of us, but not to most folks, and certainly wasn't taught about that way. What's changed on that issue, immigration, with religious folks across the political spectrum?
Yeah, I do think it's a key point to note up front that immigration historically has been one of these interesting points of intersection, even across theological and political divides, right? Like you've had even a broad swath of white evangelicals that historically have supported, say, a pathway to citizenship, and that, for 11 million, 12 million undocumented people. And so back in 2013, when there was the last major effort to pass immigration reform, you actually saw a lot of these groups attempt to work together. And it was unsuccessful, but that was kind of this big moment. But
I paid close attention to that negotiation with that comprehensive immigration bill, which passed out of the Senate, but John Boehner wouldn't take it up for a vote, at least my recollection, because he was worried it might pass, and then they would have comprehensive immigration reform, which would have, by the way, had billions for security, which they always wanted, but a lot of other things which right-wing folks shut down. Sorry to interrupt you there, but that was an important 2013. That was hugely important, and it failed.
Exactly. And I think it's also an interesting point in the history of how faith communities kind of rallied around immigration, because as we got closer to the Trump era, the fissures in the faith communities over immigration got broader and wider.
Right.
And we started to see, particularly among the subset of Christian nationalist sentiment in the United States, particularly those who believe that America was founded as a Christian nation and importantly think that it should return to that or remain as such. Folks in that category, we started to see higher rates of anti-refugee sentiment and anti-immigrant sentiment. Meanwhile, the core elements of the religious left got even louder in their support for refugees and for immigrants. And so some of the key demonstrations along the U.S.-Mexico border throughout the Trump era were often led by religious communities. In fact, a religious community even won a lawsuit when they, for their faith, compelling them to go leave out water for immigrants that may be crossing the U.S.-Mexico border.
That's right.
And so what we see at the end of that is that faith communities are arguably helping lead a lot of this. And a key component of that was the sanctuary movement. And that harkens back to a version of it in the 1980s, which was the original one. And then the new sanctuary movement that actually began on the Obama administration, where faith communities would take an undocumented immigrant into their house of worship and basically dare immigration and customs enforcement to come get them. That movement exploded under the Trump administration. We saw, mosques, synagogues, and churches, really signing on to that in a big way. And so suddenly it became not only just a political position, but one that they had physically, had tangible encounters with as individual faith communities. And so we've really kind of seen an intensification of that divide, if that makes any sense, where that overlap has become less present, but the support among people of faith in general is pretty, is arguably much louder. And probably the greatest example of this, I will say, is that during the family separation policy during the Trump administration, I, as a religion reporter, have never seen more uniform opposition to any policy put forth by the U.S. federal government among faith communities than that policy.
It would seem that religious groups across the spectrum, but certainly on the right, would want to recruit new folks from all different backgrounds and ethnicities, especially as they become Americans, and that used to be more the case. But this Christian nationalism, brand of ideology, which you've covered a lot, maybe not so much, because there also is a huge overlap, I think it's fair to say, with white supremacy. But you mentioned, just because we're talking about immigration, you brought up the Christian right and Christian nationalists. They're anti-refugee, anti-immigrant. And let me just ask you this before I get back to the religious left in your book, which is a recent piece of yours at religionnews.com. Post-Trump, Christian nationalists preach a theology of vaccine resistance. So they're also anti-vaccine. So you brought that up. I just wanted to get some of your recent reporting on that. I think most folks have heard about the overlap in churches, and sadly, a whole bunch of, or depending on how evil you are and enjoying Schadenfreude, however that's pronounced, a lot of people being, okay with these preachers who are saying they're preaching anti-vax and then dying themselves because maybe it creates awareness. But there's just so much of that, and it's really sad and horrific, in my opinion. Talk about the anti-vax movement within the Christian nationalist movement.
Yeah, it's been an interesting shift in Trumpism in general, with some of the Christian nationalist elements becoming champions of it, of embracing this, anti-mask mandate, anti-vaccine mandate, and anti-vaccine in general, a position that actually kind of pulled from what was before the very far left of the sentiment that used to be like the anti-vaccine sentiment that, back in the early 90s, what people were refer to as crunchy granola. Some of those people have now formed alliances with Christian nationalists, which is a very peculiar alliance. But Christian nationalists in particular have taken this up as a charge, seeing that these impositions, they say these mask mandates and vaccine mandates are impositions on who they are and on their freedoms. And then particularly they'll couch it as on their religious freedom. They're having a hard time actually getting religious exemptions to vaccine mandates, but taking it up as this charge in the aftermath of Trump's loss has become pretty normative in a lot of these communities.
So let's talk about the religious left, which you've written this amazing book about, which is super helpful to understand. I've not done nearly a good enough job being curious about these Americans. I know a lot of them listen to my show and how influential they are, but I thought maybe we could pick a few stories, out of what you've covered and in your book. But talk, and we'll talk about like the black religious movement next, but just the Catholic issue is very interesting because of the current Pope and because of what you write about and covered. And I remember this vaguely, Catholic nuns supporting Affordable Care Act. And you give a lot of credit to them for getting that over. And I think President Obama does, too, over the finish line there. And it's interesting just because the Catholic divide when it comes to politics. And now you've got Joe Biden. There's a lot to talk there before we get to black progressive movements and religious folks. So talk to me about the Catholics and what they did with Obamacare and where they're at now with a Catholic president.
Right. I mean, it's one of those things where it's fascinating to kind of talk about Catholicism, because Catholicism, in terms of, is one of the largest single religious groups in the country, but it's roughly split party-wise. Like as a collective group, U.S. Catholics are relatively split. And actually on certain policies, they tend to actually skew left, including abortion and immigration reform, what have you. Catholics actually arguably skew left on many, in same-sex marriage as well, in many recent polls in recent years, which is why when we saw the Affordable Care Act fight back in the early part of President Obama's tenure, it was Catholics who were supportive of the Affordable Care Act who came out against the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, who had opposed the ACA. But it was Catholic nuns who led the charge. And it looks like what the Catholic bishops weren't aware of, or at least did not take into consideration, is that Catholic nuns poll better than Catholic bishops do in the United States. And they managed to galvanize and give cover to a lot of Catholic Democrats that pushed them to support that bill. And like you said, it was Barack Obama himself who credits nuns with getting that bill across the finish line. He saved one of the pens he used to sign the Affordable Care Act for a nun who at the day of the House vote was at the Vatican making calls to lawmakers to convince them to back it.
Yeah, it's so interesting and so important and so undercovered, which is why your work in your book, I think, is super important and very relevant. Let's talk about, the Reverend barbers and the Black Lives Matter movements, which, again, I think, if I have to hear it one more time, but it's like I always have to say it, the black community in America is not monolithic. Yes, of course, such an important point, really important point, but you cover exactly the different gradations within the black religious movement, from conservative, Baptist, all the way to, the far left. And when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement, when it comes to fighting poverty and so much more, it would seem, I think it's pretty inarguable, that progressive left religious black folks in America have gained a tremendous amount of influence, like a lot in just the last few years, especially. Do I have that right?
I mean, I think Joe Biden arguably owes his presidency to black Protestant votes. And I think that is increasingly true as well. given that, you've seen a lot of Black clergy advocating for voting rights legislation. You've started seeing a lot of Black clergy in particular, pushing back against a lot of Republican overtures in ways that have garnered responses from Republicans. It's just one of the hardest things to do in progressive activism. It's not to say that there hasn't been a significant influential cadre of Black Protestant activists throughout American history, but I do think at this precise moment in American history, we are seeing an interesting moment where Black Protestants in particular are very vocal in actualizing their political goals in the public square, pushing a very progressive agenda, and even pushing Biden to embrace it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it sounds, I don't mean to discount the leaders of the past, which almost overwhelmingly it would seem religious, from Reverend King to Malcolm X to Jesse Jackson. They were all religious. Reverend Al Sharpton, and they always had a tremendous influence, I suppose, within the Black community, and certainly to get state and national legislation passed. Obviously, the Voting Rights Act, no doubt, but it just has changed so much, and they gained so much power, and I think membership and ownership of the Democratic Party. As opposed to being outsiders, they seem to be more insiders. Do I sound in any way informed?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think the way I've heard some articulated more recently is that, it's the power that was supposed to be afforded to African Americans and African American votes when the Voting Rights Act was passed. They're at least helping to actualize in the Democratic Party, kind of claiming the power that they've held for quite some time in a tangible way. Now, many Black clergy have also said that, given recent elections bills passed in states like Georgia and in Texas, that they argue that there are efforts to actually remove the element of influence they have in the ballot box. Prevent us another scenario like in Alabama, where Roy Moore, who admittedly was a uniquely flawed candidate, lost to Doug Jones. And that had a lot to do with Black Protestant votes. Many voters were spurred by their churches to show up there on Election Day, and it was enough to instill a Democratic senator from Alabama for the first time in quite some time. So, yeah, I do think that there definitely seems to be a shift in terms of claiming electoral and political power, at least in a vocal way in recent years.
How important is Senator Raphael Warnock's journey and accomplishment? I'm sure he gets, I don't know what people's opinions are about how much coverage he gets, but if you dig into his story and who he is and how he came up and how he became a senator in Georgia, no disrespect to John Ossoff, who also, but he'd been around. I don't know. How important is Senator Warnock's journey in Georgia to become senator?
I mean, I think it's from a religion reporter's perspective, like seeing somebody who is the head of such a prominent, historic Black church become a U.S. senator and still preach on Sundays while still being a U.S. senator, holding both of those things together, I think is crucial, and especially in a state like Georgia, right, where you have this dual reality of a hugely influential Black vote, but still, systemic issues that have occurred throughout American history and in recent decades as well. So to get two Democratic senators, one of which is, the head of the church where King used to preach, I think is a significant moment in American history.
Tell me about your coverage of and writing about Reverend William Barber, who's become really powerful and consistent and done so much activism, as much as anybody in certainly the Black religious community. He's, of course, the leader of North Carolina's Moral Mondays, and he's co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. And you've written a lot about him in your new book. And you've got a new story about him recently as well, in terms of how, after months of protest, his campaign, the Poor People's Campaign, is requesting a meeting with Biden. What has he done, accomplished? And then talk to me about this recent reporting of yours and where they're, what that movement and their campaign is focused on right now.
Yeah, I mean, Reverend William Barber, Bishop William Barber as well. He's arguably not just one of the most influential religious left activists. He's arguably one of the most influential progressive activists in America right now. A short history of that is that, he pushed this, helped create what was called the Moral Mondays movement in North Carolina, pushed back against a deeply conservative legislator that had swept into power there. His protests there in 2013 and 2014 were arguably the largest liberal protests in the country those years. And when, in 2016, when Democrats had, a pretty dark day from their perspective, a bright point was that the governor of North Carolina was unseated, and political analysts credited the Moral Mondays movement with helping do that. This series of protests decrying the legislation that was getting passed by that legislator and that governor. He's then, in some ways, kind of replicated some of that system at a national level with the Poor People's Campaign with a broader focus. There's a moment in my book where I talk about how he called one of his co-organizers right after the 2016 election and said, "America is North Carolina now." And the implication there, at least as I interpreted it, was that, okay, we also now have this moment where the populace feels that there's an existential threat to things that they hold dear, beliefs that they hold dear, institutions and policies that they hold dear. And so Barber was a chief organizer of demonstrations against the effort to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, for instance. The people, there were many different groups that did that. Some of the largest protests on Capitol Hill were organized by Barber and many of his, of his cohort, as it were. What's been interesting since President Biden, came into office is that Barber was unequivocal that while he endorsed Biden and preached at his inaugural ceremony or his inaugural prayer service, Barber, made clear that he would continue to protest and to push Democrats as often as possible as well, as long as it's in keeping with these larger goals of passing legislation to help poor people. So this summer, there was a series of demonstrations. In fact, one of the largest mass arrest protests in American history happened this summer, led by the Poor People's Campaign on Capitol Hill, decrying Joe Manchin and in particular, and also Kirsten Sinema for holding up elements of the Biden agenda, but also, they also pushing back against the Poor People's Campaign call for a $15 minimum wage. They say Sinema and Manchin, helped shut that down as well. In addition to voting rights bills, and the Poor People's Campaign is also calling for an end to the filibuster. And so they are continuing to push Democrats farther left on very specific issues they say would impact the poor, even in a friendly administration. And so he, again, to this day remains, and just this past week, he was in the Vatican talking about this issue. Apparently, according to him, there were already murmurs of helping make this a global movement. And so, again, he is an interesting figure, not just for those who are interested in the religious left, but those who are interested in progressive organizing in general.
I think that the Black Lives Matter movement is one, again, saying it's not monolithic. There's chapters in like every city. There's conflicts in all of these different movements as well, often. And obviously, there's a lot of coalitions as well. But what role has religion played in the Black Lives Matter movement? And as you've covered it, how disparate are they from one state, city to another in terms of what they're advocating for, fighting, and demanding?
So what clergy and activists have told me is that the short, unsatisfying answer is it depends, right? One of the narratives that's agreed upon by most people is that, the civil rights movement of the mid-20th century was led, chiefly by clergy and faith leaders. And but that is not necessarily the case with the Black Lives Matter movement. That doesn't mean that people of faith haven't been part of it. So one of the things I chronicle in the book is Reverend Tracy Blackman, who's an influential United Church of Christ minister who lived near Ferguson when those demonstrations began. And she talks about how, one of the things she had to do as a pastor when she got involved with these protests is that there were a lot of young activists, young Black Lives Matter activists who felt betrayed by the church for any number of reasons. And so she would kind of lead these repentance ceremonies early on to try to, help, build bridges with these activists. And when clergy formed their own little protest early on in the Ferguson movement, they ended up actually participating in the young Black Lives Matter activists protest instead. And it was an interesting power shift that has occurred within that movement. But what we started to see is that while it is not chiefly led by clergy in the way that the civil rights movement was in the 20th century, we have absolutely seen instances where faith leaders and clergy have started actively participating in these demonstrations. Sometimes it'll be as simple as what we saw even last year during, in the aftermath of a series of Black Lives Matter demonstrations last summer. Often churches were, serving as kind of respite centers for Black Lives Matter activists who were protesting police brutality. And sometimes it can be as extreme as the clergy are at the front lines, getting damaged, getting pepper sprayed, being part of that movement in a very physical way. And they're the first to say that they're not the only ones doing it. They're the clergy that are involved are the quickest to say that they are only one among many, and that it's a collar or a religious insignia is not required to participate in the Black Lives Matter movement, is what they tell me. But their presence has been arguably much more visible in a way than it might have been true 5 or 6 years ago.
There's so much more to your book. I'll let you go here on this last question, but just want to mention, talking about Bishop Gene Robinson, the first openly gay Episcopal bishop. You write about, I think we touched on it, but Sister Simone Campbell, who's an amazing woman, and head of the social justice lobby that we talked about with the nuns that advocated that Obama gives credit to. Linda Sarsour, who's a controversial Muslim woman who is a co-chair of the Women's March. But I wanted to just end by talking about the tribal communities that you've covered. I've been talking about and covering and working with most of my career, super interested in. But you did some old school hard-nosed journalism. And I think that in many cases, in many ways, as a white man, you can get into a lot of rooms and cover a story, and they might not, they don't see you coming, or they think you're one of theirs. But I do know that as a journalist, it's hard to gain credibility, and rightfully so, looking the way you do and walking into a reservation or a Black community, Hispanic community. But you've worked really hard to gain the trust of tribal folks, and I know that you have, and that's credit to you, because we really need great reporters like yourself covering it. Talk to me a little bit about your coverage of Native Americans and how, because they count as religious and spiritual people, often identify such, and you can tell me a little bit about that, but you covered the Dakota Access Pipeline in Standing Rock, and now we're seeing these types of movements and organizations gaining, I think, more and more influence, especially when it comes to what, frankly, their traditional rights are, but more importantly, environmental issues, water issues, and we're going to see a lot more of that. Talk to me a little bit about how you gained their credibility. That couldn't have been easy, I know.
Well, I mean, I should be clear that there are any number of reporters who've done a better job of this. There's any number of indigenous reporters that have been covering this a long time for, a variety of indigenous oriented outlets. So it was a lot to learn if I wanted to do that. My colleague, Emily, even at Art Religion News Service, she was at Standing Rock in a tent covering it there. But what was interesting, it started when I was back at Think Progress and continued on in my time at Religion News Service, was that, when Standing Rock happened, one thing that was often either way down in the story or ignored in the story was the fact that many of the participants in that movement deeply identified it as a spiritual cause, that the pushing back against the pipeline was a spiritual element for them. There were prayer rides through what was called a prayer camp. And while, and when I was speaking with people about this, one of the first things I heard is that the fact that indigenous spirituality and religious beliefs are not seen to be as credible as, say, Western Christian religious beliefs is an old story in American history. And it's why they've struggled to win even religious freedom lawsuits in the courts, where Hobby Lobby, for instance, was citing the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act, which was created in the aftermath of Supreme Court decisions that lawmakers felt were unfair to indigenous communities. But it's primarily been conservative Christians that have benefited from that law. And so
was that the Peyote Case?
That is one of them. It's two of them, and one of them is the Peyote Case.
Yeah.
And the activists say that this inconsistency, from their perspective, has been around for quite some time. Yeah. And so what was also interesting is at the same time that Standing Rock was happening, we started seeing some activism in Hawaii around Mauna Kea. The building of a telescope there that was, from the perspective of activists, one more defilement of a region that they deemed sacred, that could also, because of the scale of the construction, hurt the delicate environment in that region. And one thing that started to become true is that activists from disparate parts of the indigenous activist community started showing up at each other's things. There were delegations that went from Hawaii to Standing Rock and back. And so as I started to cover these, and people would show up in Washington, D.C. for demonstrations outside the White House or outside the Capitol, it just became very clear when you talked to a lot of these activists that spirituality and, which is how it's often, the term that is most often used to describe it, by the activist or faith and religion is very important to them. And which made it really interesting. And because Standing Rock became one of these seminal moments in environmental activism writ large. And because since then, indigenous activists have been at the vanguard of so much environmental activism, pushing back against pipelines and constructions of variety of things on land.
Major triumphs as well, major accomplishments too. I mean, it starts with like being covered by Democracy Now! And like nobody else, and then the police start showing up, and next thing you know, a multinational oil company can't build its pipeline, and they really have had some major successes, not to mention public land issues, not to mention, getting elected into Congress. I think a couple of representatives identify as indigenous, and the Secretary of the Interior is an Indian lady named Deb Haaland. It's amazing. So I feel like it's like, again, they're rising up and as it sounds like from your reporting, they're working together and getting things done, which takes a long time, but some major accomplishments, it would seem.
And I'll disclose by saying what's fascinating about this, too, is because how powerful their activism has been, it's become an inspiring point for across the progressive spectrum. Yeah. People of myriad of faiths have now, you go to a Poor People's Campaign event, and you often see an indigenous speaker. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she went to Standing Rock, and she described it as a spiritual experience that inspired her to run for office. And when she put out the Green New Deal, included was a subsection speaking about indigenous rights. And so I feel like it's one of those things where if you talk about the impact of a group, if this was the religious right, people would have covered it arguably that way. Yeah. But it can get lost when looking at these groups to note the religious and spiritual elements of their activism.
It's such a good point. And, it's like you must have had so many amazing experiences being involved with all different types of religious community across the political spectrum, watching their ceremonies, watching their traditions. And I've had the great honor of being involved in a bunch of tribal traditions, including one where I forget what it was, but they were telling stories. And at the end, they gave ashes from the fire in a little satchel to me, and it was representative. I forget what exactly. I'm so unthoughtful right now about what it was, but like ashes of their aunt. It was very symbolic and important to them, and they gave it to me, and it felt so amazing. And then I brought it home and fucking spilled it everywhere and felt horrific about it. But the point was, I did have like a similar experience. And I think whether it's, whatever religion, and I'm not religious at all, but I stepping into those places, and as you've covered them, I'm sure you've experienced a lot of amazing things and witnessed a lot of amazing things. And hopefully you've just never destroyed a gift that anybody has given you like I did.
Yeah, I think one of the things about journalism, I think it's important, I do want to make one caveat, which is that newsroom diversity is important too, and that like we should have, a variety of reporters from a variety of different faiths, traditions, backgrounds, races, what have you, so that because they can see things that other people won't see. They can see stories that others will miss. That having been said, as a reporter, if you cover communities that are unlike you every day, and I have seen reporters go in without humility and without respect for the various traditions that they enter into, and I have been guilty of that as well. And it does not get you the story.
Yeah.
And
right.
So people need to believe that you are going to handle their story with respect. Even if you disagree with them, even if they disagree with you. And like you said, in a variety of different faith communities from across the spectrum, one thing I've often learned the hard way is to take the time to make sure that people say, look, I'm going to write the story, but I'm here to try to accurately represent you in that story.
And that point of view and thought is why you're so good at your job. Read them at religionnews.com. Get the book, which is so important, really important. American Prophets, The Religious Roots of Progressive Politics and the Ongoing Fight for the Soul of the Country. Jack, I'm only sorry I've never talked to you before. You've been doing this work for a while, and you're really good at it. And I hope I hope you'll come on again and maybe even join, a live group and answer questions, because you're really, really good at your job. And I appreciate you joining me a lot. Congratulations, and go get the paperback now, everybody. Thank you so much, Jack.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, another new guest to introduce you to, and another great book that you're going to have to buy. I'm sorry. At Jack M. Jenkins on Twitter. His book, American Prophets. Check it out. Read him at Religious News Service. Follow him on Twitter and let him know that you heard him here on Stand Up with Pete. Very happy to have him on the show for the first time, and always want to know who you think. I think somebody did reference him to me, refer him, suggest him, introduce him to me. So I'm not sure who that is. Sorry, I'm not giving you credit, but remind me if you're that person. Jack Jenkins. Great stuff. Got a great new guest tomorrow as well, transgender woman named Jessie Earl, that we're going to talk about the Chappelle special. I'm going to learn all about a whole bunch of stuff that I learned from her YouTube channel that I'm excited to share with you and talk about more. That should be great. As always, though, let me know who you'd like me to have here on the show, and I'll be in Orlando this week. I don't know what the podcast is going to be like for Thursday and Friday, because I'm going to be on the road and it's going to be tough to turn it around. I'll have at least one interview each day, I'm sure, that I'll have on here. I'm not worried about that, but also got Wajahat Ali coming up, Tim Wise, comedian Dave Segall, I know, and that's all I can think of at the moment. Not a lot of women this week. My bad. Who should I have on? You tell me. Talk to you tomorrow, as always. Singer-songwriter, Grammy Award winner, the great John Carroll, taking us out with Stand Up.
And then stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw the land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.